politician is we have to provide a response on the spot. We don't get the chance to recraft a sentence, although you'd like to in your speeches and so on sometimes. But that means that there's an immediacy to it that you will not always know the answer to the question. You will not always remember that you did something 6 months ago or made a remark 6 months ago that may now be dissonant. And that's just part of the gig. As annoying as it is when you get hung up on it, that's just part of the gig. I don't know a way around it other than when you do make an error, front up, say, listen, I got that wrong. Here are the circumstances in which I got it wrong, and that's why. But this is the case now. Now, you know, you'll be smashed for that, but it's probably better to do that than over time be denying or prosecuting the notion that you're infallible. It's just nonsense.
I would start with my own profession, which I think is almost the most culpable. I'll give you an example. Oddly, it comes from the same election that Philip Adams called me about at that time. It was 92. George Bush was the President of the United States, and the Republican nomination for the governorship of Louisiana had been won by a man called David Duke, who some of you may remember, who was a former head of the Ku Klux Klan and of the American Nazi Party. So the President was asked at a press conference in the White House, in the Executive Mansion itself, how do you feel about the flag of your party being carried in a major state by a Nazi and a Klansman? And his reply was, I can always quote it from memory, he said, well, I'd like to be positioned where I can be perceived as having been distanced from that. and everybody wrote that down loyally because, okay, we can check that box, that's the right answer. He should be perceived as being distanced from this. And he gave but he didn't do anything actually to earn the perception or the distancing or the positioning, but it was the right answer, so it got written down. Okay, that was fine. Didn't have to prove any more. This is terrible. John Carey is somewhere in Sydney now. I don't know if any of you have been to any of his panels. He wrote a wonderful introduction to an anthology of journalism for the OUP about 25 years ago, where he said, the cliche is waiting inside the typewriter, or we would now say the keyboard. It's waiting there. Cliches, as you know, should be avoided like the plague. They're always lurking, and they're in the keyboard, and the journalist's fingers touch the keyboard, and the cliche, sensing this, goes into the fingers and has up the arms, into the brain, and then down onto the page. It's there. So you find you've written that the man who not only married the most beautiful woman in the world, but also won the Nobel Prize and the Pulitzer in the same year had no mean achievement. It's written itself for you. It was already there, waiting. And so you can become perceived as having distanced yourself from. This is it's not even thinking badly. It's refusing to think at all. That's the problem. And I think my profession is the one that's most responsible for it.
Of course, Orwell used that metaphor of the prefabricated henhouse, that you use words and you don't think about, or as Annabel was saying, they could be constructed in any order. Yeah. You just let them do the thinking for you.
The future lies before us, the past behind. We must light the torch of knowledge at the fountain of wisdom. It writes itself.
Or that Australian classic, we've got to get the status quo back to the way it was before. Now, we should go to your questions. Over on the right here, please. Yes.
I'm a journalist, and one of the most frustrating things I experience is when I have an article published, such as one that was printed yesterday, my editor will make changes to it that sort of soften some of the language. So, for example, yesterday I wrote about homophobia and mentioned the Westboro Baptist Church in America who have banners saying God hates fags and AIDS cures fags. And I used those examples in the article, but the editor changed it to anti-gay banners. So I guess my question to you is, do you think at all there is a space in the media for dumbing down language or for softening language? Like, for example, with swear words, if we're quoting someone, let's say it's the word shit, they'll put S asterisk asterisk asterisk, when we all know what the word is, so why don't we just write it? So that's my question to you. Is there a place for the softening and the dumbing down of language? Because I don't feel there is, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
Christopher, Annabel?
That reminds me, we were just discussing what I consider to be the most evil and brilliant put-down of a sub-editor, and please, I don't associate myself with this sentiment because my sub-editors always save me from hideous debacles, but Clive James is reputed to have, in the correspondence with a sub-editor, used the line, listen, if I wrote like that, I'd be you, which is...
Keep that one burnished and by you.
But this is how language gets the edges knocked off it or gets banged out of shape, isn't it? It passes through a succession of people, each of whom think that their own understanding of what is appropriate language is superior to his or her predecessor, I suppose. And that's what you've been a victim of yesterday. Good luck with your next piece for that publication. But it's that sort of running interference that alters language, and when it's undertaken by great numbers of people, that's when language itself changes. It's not always a bad thing; just can be quite a spooky thing. Your thoughts?
Well, it's the same problem as of euphemism. People thinking that if they could find a way of softening the blow, in other words, you're not crippled, you're physically challenged, for example, or you're no longer a Negro, but you're an African American. And I actually do know of a sub-editor who changed a headline, and it was in a Boston paper saying, "State budget back in the African American." Because all he knew was there were certain things not to do, and he doggedly did what the style book said. What's going to happen there is actually a rather cruel outcome. People, the words physically challenged will become sarcastic. They will themselves become the thing you can't say, because that's the way of being nasty about someone who's a gimp or a crip. But the wish to do this, to bring this about, it has to do with the combat between the Colosseum of the superego and the wish to censor ourselves and to euphemize things is very deep in us all. And it needs to be looked into individually and then very carefully rooted out.
And question over here.
I think the goal of political speech, political language, should be to simplify without being simplistic. But that's very difficult in the days of the 5-second sound grab and 140-character limit on Twitter. I think Keating said it best when he said that if Abraham Lincoln made the Gettysburg Address today, it wouldn't be reported in full. The journalists would wait for the doorstop and take a one-liner from it. The question really is, how do you explain something like an emissions trading scheme or foreign policy of Australia for the next 20 years when our attention span has been so reduced by the use of things like Twitter, emails, text messages, all of these devices that really, if not dumb us down, at least curtail the use of good language.
You might direct that one to...
Yes.
Nathan, your experience of explaining complexity.
Actually, that's a comment, isn't it? Not a question. And a very good one.
But that is probably the great difficulty in modern political life, how you have a sensible policy debate, often about something complex. We've just had probably the most far-reaching debate on health reform that I can recall. I'm 42. I don't recall the debates around Medicare, or Medibank as it was in in the 70s. But the paradox is that there is more information out there than ever before for people to access if they are interested in the policy area. But you take health reform, the takeout from that is lots of money and a change to governance structures. Now, beneath those two key outcomes or key shifts, I don't know precisely what's going to happen at the state level that's going to help you get your knee fixed or your hip fixed later on. I don't know. And I suspect most people don't. We rely on engendering interest in a policy area, pointing people to a website often and saying this is where all the information is that you're going to need. And it's, people have thousands of messages bombarding them each day. You all know that. The working families know it particularly well. They've got rear a family, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, and at some point, when they get a bit of spare time, take an interest in these things that we all think matter. Well, that's hard.
It seems to me that, I guess, once upon a time, if you